Okay, so thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. I don't know if anybody remembers, I'm doing this for the second time here at Creative Mornings. So the first time was a lot of fun, so the bar is very high today that we get good energy in here and have fun again today. No, this way, right? And then down. This was it. Okay, so a little bit about myself. My name is Philipp Refior. As Paula said, I'm a product designer, industrial designer, you need to say today, because product designer is kind of the word, the meaning is creeping. And so I was trained as an industrial designer, which qualifies me to talk about design today. But I also know there's a lot of design professionals here in the room, and I will talk very much from my perspective, and I don't claim that this is the whole truth. So it's basically a personal journey that I want to share with you in the first part. And then the second part of my speech today, I want to deep dive a little bit in one of the projects that we are doing currently. And when I say we, I now have my own company. It's called The Deep Bench, and it's an innovation consultancy. And if I say innovation consultancy, I already tell you that there's a lot of things you can do with design, and that's what I want to talk about today, mainly. So design is probably, from my experience, and I'm obviously not objective, one of the professions, one of the fields that is capable of reinventing itself again and again and changing the meaning about what it really is again and again. Which makes it a very exciting field, but it also leads to, when you ask 100 people what is design, you get 100 different answers and 100 different impressions. And I always like to show this, because to me, these are the two bookmarks of the ideas of what design is in people's heads. So on the left, you have this idea of design as this superpower of aesthetic excellence, and there's a little bit of a elitism kind of sprinkled on it, and it's a bit, like, being a designer means you have kind of the feeling for aesthetics, and nobody else can tell you what to do. And on the other side, you have this very, sorry, am I, did I give away what I think about that too much? But on the other side, so to me, what's interesting is this is a bit of an elitist kind of a bit old-fashioned stand. And on the other side, you have this contemporary idea of design being this democratic force of being able to empower everybody to be creative and to be innovative and come up with new ideas. And I don't know how many know Capital One. So this is the logo of Capital One, which is an American financial institution, which doesn't even have a real product, if you ask me. It's credit cards mainly, and not even a nice logo, if you ask me. But they are, if you look in the listings and you look at design-led companies, they're always up there as one of the most design-led companies, because they are employing design thinking and design processes in their company to make their company the most innovative in their field. So to me, these are the, just two examples of how different the definitions for design can be. But I want to talk a little bit about myself and want to tell you about my story about design. And obviously, I studied design, I got into design, but I want to tell you in hindsight, looking back, why I think I got to design and what attracted me to design. So when I grew up, basically, and for anybody who heard my first talk, you might remember some parts, my parents moved a lot around, and I went to a lot of different schools. I was always the new kid. And so you come to situations where there's already social groups formed, and you're always a little bit on the outside and look in. And sometimes you get in, sometimes you don't. C'est la vie, I guess. And when you look from the outside, I think it has a lot of advantages as well, because you basically look a little bit more critical and you challenge things more. If you're not really part of a group and you look, or of a setting or of a culture even, and you look in from the outside, you are more sensitized to picking up things and wonder, why things are the way they are, and you question things more than when you're used to the space, used to the group, used to the social setting. So I feel that kind of, that I was always a little bit more asking, why are things the way they are, and couldn't they be different, and couldn't people be more nice to me, and things like that. But that's a different story. I was in that age then very attracted to the idea of design, and that's more what I showed you, the two sides, more the design on the left side, and I call it design with a capital D. And in Germany, we have this beautiful word, Autorendesign. I don't know, I don't even know if it translates into English, but it's what I mean by that. So in the late 80s, early 90s, there were this bunch of guys, and it was all guys, middle-aged men that always wore black, and they have when they take a picture, they have their hand on their chin and look very thoughtful. And basically what they did is they reinterpreted the world from their point of view. And they used, in my field, in product design, they used everyday objects, for some reason always chairs. Every designer has to design a chair, but chairs, kitchenware, whatever, and gave it a different aesthetic. And obviously there was more than just aesthetic to it. There was a story to it. There was a philosophy to it. And sometimes there were also the idea of new processes. So you would make something in a new material or in a new manufacturing process. And so that leads to really challenging the status quo, because you looked at objects and it's like, hey, why can't this look the way I make it to look? And I thought that was really fascinating. And here's two examples. So on the left is a chair. I don't know if it's still somebody's seen it. It's by Mark Newson. It's a fiberglass chair. On the right is this really famous juice press from Philipp Stark, and it's famous because it doesn't work. And the same, that chair is uncomfortable as hell, but that's not the point. The point is that you built something, you reinterpreted something that people thought they know how it looked like, and just gave it a totally new aesthetic. And I really thought that was quite fascinating. So then I ended up going to design school, because I thought design, that's all for me, and I want to do this, and I want to do what these guys do. I want to take pictures like that myself and wear a lot of black, which didn't work so well. And I went to design school to New York, to Parsons School of Design, which was a fashion design school mainly, which was a bit odd, because product design was a very small department, but it was very intimate and it was very interesting. But what I thought I would learn was like rules around aesthetics and a lot of how to make things and whatever. But in that school, and it might be a typical thing in that school, what we really learned was how to present and how to talk about our ideas. And I remember being kind of annoyed, because I thought, I want to learn something that I can write down, and I can learn, that I have something in my head, and they just put me up there and make me talk and make me, basically it felt like one critique after critique after critique. So some person would present something, other people would give feedback. And now I think, looking back, that was really important, because for all you guys who work in creative fields, the most vulnerable thing is when you have an idea, and of course it's an idea, it's just a starting point, a spark, and you tell it to other people. And it's so easy to shoot it down, and it's so easy to tell you why that's so stupid, and oh my God, and how could you think of that? And there's certain cultures who do that more than others. I'm not going to name any names, but anyway. So learning how to be comfortable with sharing something that's half-baked and feeling comfortable with that I think is a really good skill. And the other side of the story is as important, learning how to give feedback and learning how to tell people or help people improve things without ruining their ideas and making them feel ridiculous or vulnerable about the idea. So I thought that was really what I got out of art school. And then I went to work, and I went to a consultancy in New York, Smart Design, which was, I think, probably the biggest industrial design consultancy in New York. And the reincarnation of design that I came across was universal design. And universal design is basically the predecessor to inclusive design or accessibility in design. The idea behind universal design is really pretty and really good. This is to make objects that don't need much explanation and that are usable for the most possible biggest group out there. So include people, as much people as possible. But it was a little earlier than what we're talking about today. So back then it was really about ergonomics. So the field was really driven by, measuring your body, seeing does it fit in your hand, does it fit in somebody else's hand. So our biggest client back then was OXO, that was these kitchen tools. And I don't know if you've seen this object. This is it's in the MoMA collection or whatever. It's a potato peeler, and it basically, the grip part looks like a bicycle grip. It's like this big, it's rubber, And it's designed so that it fits in the most possible amount of hands and they can use it comfortably. And so the story behind this brand and behind this product is really, really beautiful, I think. It's the guy who founded OXO, the company, which is now a huge multinational company, was this American guy in his 60s plus, and his wife had arthritis. So this is a condition where you have inflammation in your joint and you really can't put much pressure on things. And she loved cooking, and he wanted her to still be able to cook, probably a little bit self-serving as well, I assume, but that's... anyway, so he wanted her to cook, and so he founded this company because he thought there should be kitchen tools that are able for everybody to grab. And so so he did, and the company that I joined, Smart Design, was basically the industrial design company behind that. And what it means is, like, for every project, so they started with the peeler, then we did knives, we did all sorts of kitchen utensils, we did buckets for gardening and so on. And what you would always do is, and that was before CNC and before 3D printing, we would make like 20 of these kind of mock-ups for a product, and they would differ in size by 0.5 millimeter. And you would make them, put them next to each other, and you would have a number of people and just ask them, carry it, you know, pick it up, do this, do that, and you would really like basically measure and get feedback which one is the most comfortable for the most people. So it's really like a mathematical kind of exercise. And so this was kind of, and I again talk from my perspective, but I think this was generally the time then when design ended being this kind of individual vision and started to be about research and really learning from people behavior, which obviously led then to what probably most of you know, which is now the holy grail of design. It's human-centered design, which is the idea, and I probably don't need to tell you, that you want to find out not only what people say and do, but how they think and feel about products, about interactions, about services, to create products and to create services that really address their needs and their desires. And so that started in the 90s, I think, from my point of view. Again, if somebody wants to fact check, please do and tell me if I'm wrong. But I thought it was interesting because designers started to work with researchers, but then at some point they realized that it's not just about your physical ability, but it's also about what's in here and how people react to products and deal with products. And so research became less about measuring and more about asking the right questions, the whole set of tools that you have in ethnography and such. And so it became more this design research as we know it today. One project, so we did a bunch, I was still at Smart Design at that time, and we did a lot of electronics with HP. We did watches, we did a lot of kitchen tools. And I had one project I worked on was diapers. And I think this was really interesting for the idea of human-centered design, because A, it was obviously not about aesthetics, not that much. B, it was obviously about ergonomics. It has to fit on the baby. But on the other hand, your main stakeholder is the parents, right? I mean, the baby, yeah, should be dry, But if the parents are not happy, you won't sell diapers. So I think this is a really good example about really finding out what people feel and think, and what are the marks you have to make, what are the design details that you have to make that calm parents, that give them the feeling of security and control in this field. For me, it was a bit traumatizing, I have to say, because I was a pretty young designer, so I had to build prototypes of diapers, really fun, and I had to observe prototype of diapers when they were used. So, all in the name of design. So I think, this is kind of like, so now we have human-centered design in all design disciplines, human-centered this, human-centered that. But lately, I'm really happy to hear that people talk about planet-centered. And I think, and I always, I have a business partner, and we always fight about this, because I have a bit of a cynical view to human-centered, because I personally believe if you are too human-centered, you make people lazy, and you make it too easy for people. You run the danger of making it too easy for people, and you lose sight of the other stakeholders, and one big stakeholder being obviously our environment. which we now realizing that we have to be much more careful with. And so it shouldn't be human-centered or planet-centered. It should really be these both, right? It should be that those should be your main stakeholders, your users, and the environment that you should always keep in mind. Let's talk about me again, because that's what I'm here for. So in my career, I went to a couple of design agencies, and then I made a big step, and I went to Japan to work for 3M, which is an American material science company, and I basically was in charge of design for the Asia Pacific region. And design then meant design thinking, and so this was a big jump where obviously as a material science company, I don't know how many people have contacts with 3M or have seen their products. There are consumer products like Post-it notes and some tapes, but the design is limited on those. So it's not so much about designing products and designing experiences or so on, but it's really about innovation. So our job was to work with the scientists and to work with people who develop technologies to find new applications for these technologies. And that's where design thinking came in. And design thinking is obviously a huge word, and again, a term that means a lot of things for a lot of people. But to me, it's basically the idea of using the designer's toolset and the designer process to enable non-designers to work creatively. So that's, to me, kind of the definition. And what that means is you take the design process, and this is the process as we like to call it and write it down in our company, and you take that and you give it in the hands of the people who are normally sitting on Microsoft Office products and make nice PowerPoints or Excel or whatever. So what I believe is that, so first of all, in Germany there's schools specialized, not just in Germany, but since we're here, specialized in design thinking, and there's a lot of talk about what's the right process and what phase comes after what and when can you make a loop and when not. All great discussions, but I think it's kind of missing the point, because the point is that as designers you are very hands-on and you've been learning very early to do as much yourself or with limited resources as possible to get to a result. So there's always a result in the end, and it's very hands-on. And teaching that process to people who don't work like that anymore, and the reality is most people in big companies don't work like that anymore because they have a very specific task, they do that very specialized, and then they have to work with a lot of other departments and people to get to something, if even there is a result at the end, a visible result. So to give them the power to do something with this process and see their results is super enlightening for most people. So being able to empower people, I think, that's the secret of design thinking, to give people a process or tools on their hands that they really do something themselves and see a result and can be innovative. And so I did that at 3M for 5 years, and it was really super cool and super fun, and I learned a lot about different technologies. I learned a lot about different cultures. But then I came back to Germany, and now I started my own company, as I said before, and basically that's what we're doing. We're using design tools, and we help companies to innovate in the most different kind of ways. So that's kind of the core of what we do. And if somebody asks me what do you do exactly, it's really, really hard, and there is no such a thing as an elevator pitch, because every project is different, every question is different we get. But that's also what makes it fun. However, we also recently have come to work in this area of, which is also kind of a new buzzword, is behavioral design. And we kind of only discovered that it's a buzzword after we've been doing something like, oh, this is behavioral design, I guess. So what we did is, where do I start? We basically, as a company, we are a small company. At that point, we were 4 people. We said, what is our role in the whole picture of climate change? What can we do? What is our contribution to CO2 output, to better understand, where are we? What can we do better? And so, long story short, what came out of this whole exercise is this little kit that's supposed to help people to really evaluate their own position, their own behavior, and help them to improve their behavior, even ever so slightly, to change their behavior to be less resource intensive. And so when we got into this story, what you think, you start talking and you're like, I'm pretty good. I know what I shouldn't do, and I take my bicycle here and there, and I don't eat that much meat and whatever. And it's always the other people that are the ones who make the mistakes, and that's kind of, I think, the easy way to think about it. But the reality really is that here we go, that we all, the biggest delta, the biggest gap is within ourselves, right? We all know what to do, and we all are human beings and live our lives, and there's, within everybody, me first of all, there's a lot of room for improvement. And so the goal really was for us to, how can we tighten this gap and make this gap smaller and help everybody to adapt their behavior. And to do that, we did kind of a social experience within our company for a month. We were totally transparent about everything that had to do with resources and behavior that uses resources, from flushing the toilet to how did you get to work to how many times did you open the fridge. Everything was put on list, everything you had to write down, so everybody knew where they are and where the others are, and it obviously created some competition and some comparison, and it helped really to improve your own behavior. And that wasn't really the goal at the beginning, but we noticed that we all kind of really, everybody was like, well, I can do better than that, and if he can do it, I can do it. And so we actually were pretty impressed with, in this month, how we all improved our CO2 footprint just within a couple of weeks. And so anyway, so we did this exercise, and we did a lot of research, and my business partner, she's a psychologist, so she did a lot of studying, and we really found that, because to finish the story, after that month, we all did really well, but then the month was over and everybody fell right back into their old behavior, and my first meal was at McDonald's, and so anyway, so we noticed, okay, so it's not as easy as just like starting new behavior. It's like you have to get people into action, and you have to get people to keep interaction. And which then, if you talk about getting people into action, which raises the question, why do we know how to do what we should be doing, why don't we do it? And the reasons are obvious. First of all, we all think that any change would be to our negative, right? Like our lifestyle would decrease, it would be less convenient, less individual, less about us. So it would be a sacrifice for us. The second one is, change always is difficult, and I think my theory is, especially in industrial countries, we are so about planning things and about taking risk out of our lives by planning and making sure everything, the next step is planned and planned and planned. So we're really, really bad at making changes in industrial countries. And the third obvious thing is, if we talk about climate change, and actually, I don't know, this should be a little longer. Anyway, there's a guy sitting here. When you talk about climate change, it's just such a huge goal. So you're like, what difference does it make? So this is all, I don't tell you anything new about that, but to just realize it helps you, I think, to understand what the potentials are. So we are trapped in our comfort zone, and everybody builds their own kind of avoidance strategies, and everybody has their own little story in their head why things are bad but don't really affect me right now, and that's just natural, and that's human. So there's no blame here. It's just the way things are. So what we did then, with the help of my business partner, we did a lot of research, and we basically defined 6 of these avoidance strategies that there are, and basically most people fall into one of these 6 strategies. And for each of their strategy, there's like a psychological explanation behind it, why you do what you do and what your brain is doing to do that. And so as in the set that I showed you, we have these cards that give you the 6 avoidance strategies, and then they give you the explanation, and then they also give you some hints and steps how to break through this avoidance strategy. And then it comes to the second part, which is how to keep people going. I didn't know it was that bad. Anyway, let's ignore that. So, I told you about the story when we did our 1-month project, and then after a month, everybody was just like, oh, whatever, let's forget it. So change is it's not a switch, right? It's a process, and you have to remind yourself. And for that, you also need the right environment. And as I said, so we had set ourselves a certain time frame, and so do most people. And once that time is over, gravity comes back and it's like, oh no, it's kind of nice. My life before was kind of nice, and there's a million reasons why you should stop doing what you wanted to do, and maybe it really was hard actually, or a lot of it has to do with your social environment. So you get stupid comments from people like, oh yeah, do you want to be the world saver here or whatever. Odd social situations. So the typical thing, was I think 3 years ago. So when we started this, and now I've seen a lot of stores have changed, but when you would go to the bakery, they would always put everything in one paper bag, right? And this dumb thing to go to the same baker every day and have to tell him every time again, can you just put it all in one bag, or even better, take my bag and put it in there. It's just, after a while, you're just like, okay, I feel stupid to say the same thing over and over, right? I don't know why they don't remember it. And this what is also interesting, which we really felt, is this, you have a craving for just like to put it all aside. It's like, this is stupid, and rebellion, right? I want to go back to my lifestyle. I did something, and enough of that. So all these pull you kind of back into this comfort zone. But there's also reasons to obviously to keep doing what you're doing. Experiencing your own power, like you think about a lot of things, but doing things and being, hey, I can do this. For me, it was, I walk to work every day, which is 5 kilometers, and so it's 45 minutes plus one way. And I said, I don't have the time for that, and why would I do that? And then you do it, and you see, wow, this is really cool that I do it, and it feels good, and it also has positive side effects, obviously, health-wise, and I noticed that this is the only time a day I have for myself to think about things, which I didn't consider before. There's obviously also positive social rewards that people say, hey, it's cool what you're doing, and people want to know more about it. And yeah, getting to know something new. So there's forces in both directions. And your self-motivation obviously is the biggest force. If you keep a bigger goal and you say, this is what I really want to do, then that really helps. So anyway, we also, going back to our product, this kit that we did, so we have these 6 building blocks that we believe help you to go through and push through. And again, it's this 6 building blocks, and then there's a psychological explanation about it, what it really means, and little start helpers to do it. So this is basically our kit. The strategies, the psychological mechanisms, then action starters, and then on the other side to keep going, the building blocks that help the psychological effects that lie behind it, and again, action starters to keep going. And the whole thing is thought as a little self-help tool, so it's like plan action, start action, sustain action, and as I said, this is this little tool. So we did this, and it was really empowering, and obviously we are our biggest own. We use it now with our clients in small groups, and for workshops, we've used it. We have given some workshops on some universities. We're using it ourselves, and this is the most empowering thing, that you kind of start to think about your own behavior more, and we're pretty happy with it so far. So anyway, so that was just some different sides that I experienced about design in my career, and then there's always the question, what is next, and what's the next big thing? And I have no idea, but I do know that it will have to do with these 3 things. So it will be something about challenging the status quo. I think that's what design is always about. Obviously, it's not just questioning and destroying, it's building something new, or giving some positive ideas for tomorrow. And then what I always find is that what is typical about design is, as designers, you tend to find challenges that other people don't even see that they are, So it's not, you don't fix something that's totally broken, because there's people for that, but you basically define things that other people don't find so obvious as things that have to be fixed. And finally, I want to leave you with this that I had in my LinkedIn feed, and I think that's also very true. After I said a lot of positive things about design, I also think that design is part to blame about the excess of product and stuff and consumerism that we have in our world. So the future of design will be less, basically, right? Anyway, I think that was my last slide. Did I go okay in time? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
questions for Yeah.
Do you have an online shop for behavioral?
We do. Actually, if you hello@thedeepbench.com, and then I can send it to you. So I didn't want to sell anything today, but he asked.
Like a non-commercial event. Yes.
Phil, thanks so much. I have so many reactions to what you just said, and I'm wondering, because you're talking about behavior design, how that is, how you're, since you're doing innovation consulting, how is that looking in terms of choice architecture and helping others sort of not only sustain and plan this change, but rather making it easier for people to make better choices in terms of how everything is designed, right? Like what you're talking about with psychology and Thaler or nudges. Is that something you're doing, and how do you see that affecting design in the future?
So I think, and we have a lot of discussions about this in our office, so design is always affecting behavior, right? I mean, you design something and that's affecting behavior, but so it's nothing new. There's nothing like, wow, you can design behavior. But if you focus, and if you call it that, and you focus, and you come from that way, and you really look at that way, I think, yes, you can do a lot. So yes, I call it, like a mindset that we always try to bring into our projects to really think about, how does what we do and what we propose and what we do with our clients affect behavior in the end. So it's kind of like one way of looking at things, but it's not, it's not reinventing really anything. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
Okay. Otherwise you can, okay, yeah.
I still have a question. Do you have any, let's say, a specific example how it worked for any customer? I mean, if you're allowed to tell us, which project to take over and how this changed the specific behavior?
Well, it's not revolutionary, as I said. So we're working with a big machine maker on HMI interfaces of the future, like when things move autonomous and such. And there is this, it's always the question, like, so you have people who are operating something, right? And what are they going to do in the future? And how they going to behave in the future? And you take something away from them, what they do now, but they still will be there. So there's a whole new behavior to be designed and to be put together for them to feel like they're valued and they have something to contribute, right? So in that sense, it plays into our work right now. But the main part is, and that's why, is this project that we really like on this idea of changing our own behavior and challenging ourselves to improve our, this gap between this is what I kind of want to be and this is what I really are every day. So to really remind yourself on that.
It was one on the back first, and then.
Yeah. I think it was me. I can totally relate to what you're talking about from where I am with nutrition and health. So it's interesting because then if you take it to the level of products, how do you take the behavioral change to that level, and are you working at that level? Because we've made it so easy that we're constantly going back to normal habits. So how do we make it easy to go into a new habit, which then starts changing behavior? So are there some materialistic products that you're looking at? Because that's some of the behavioral changes that we need to start making for the planet as well.
It is, yeah, and that's good. And I think, so before you really, I can't give you an example like here you change the lid to do that, or what, like a physical change, but I think you have to, it's a lot about communication, right? Like how you present that product, how you talk about the product. So in that sense, it's not so much then about the product design, but it's about communicating the product and telling a story about the product and putting it in context. I think, because yes, I totally agree. Like that's what I meant with human-centered, because when everything is so super human-centered, it's just about convenience a lot of times. Because if we're honest, that's what we all want, right? And so you have to break out of that. And I think it's about storytelling and it's about communication a lot more than it is.
Yeah, and it's almost also it's easier for us to go forward, right? We need to find ways to go forward rather than saying to people, going backwards.
Well, that's a huge discussion that if you want to take that on right now. But yes, I believe so, yeah.
It's like making it easy for people. It's like that closing the loop for people as well in terms of returning their packaging needs to be easy, for instance.
Well, that's the thing, right? If you, we are like, another thing is convenience. The other thing is status, right? Like a lot of things I think come back to, we are humans, we are in a society, there's status, like who you are to, like we meet, what do we think each other? We won't get that out of our society, but a lot of the objects, a lot of the stuff that we have around us is right about that, to accessorize ourselves, to know who we are, who you are. And so we want to have a world where all that doesn't matter and we have less product and we have less stuff, but I think that's too easy. That I think the approach is too simple. We have to understand that this is what we need as humans, and how can we make it so it's not so consumerist and so wasteful. That's really the challenge.
Very, very interesting talk. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
I think,
My question goes a bit in the same direction. First of all, I'm also really happy to see planet-centered design, because I come from permaculture design like decades ago, and now it's like finally there on a slide from a product designer. First time I see it in that way. And so I would like to know how, apart from this behavior design, how do your clients react to this planet-centered design idea, and how do you implement that specifically, like talking about or thinking about circular design, regenerative design, these kind of things.
And that's the second speech I have today. No, but it's a really, really fascinating. So we're working with a big German consumer company on the topic of circularity. And what we do, and this is, again, this would be a second talk, and a lot of this thinking comes in there and this goal comes in there. What we find there, it's really hard to close the gap between, circularity has become such an academic topic, and there's so much thought in it and so many people who work on it that it almost becomes a bit of an ideology in my eyes sometimes, and where companies are. So there's another gap, and you have to bring this together. And because it is workable. I mean, there's science behind it. There's all these ideas that they can work, but right now there's a lot of talk and a lot of thinking about on where it becomes too ideologic for me sometimes. And I think, again, bridging it with reality is a challenge. So what we do with this company is basically we work with their R&D and their design department to give them like very broad approaches. So when you have a new brief, you have a new product to develop, what are the six? We have six entryways into circularity where you can start, right? You have to think, things have to be able to be taken apart, you have to prolong the life, things like that, right? And so we have those six entryways, and then we have little action starters for every entryway, actual tips what to do. But we find it so hard, and it's also like when you do these projects, it's always like, so what are examples out there? And you always get the same greenwashed examples again about, oh, here's a circular product, and it's either a super, super, super low-tech product, or it's a product the world doesn't need because somebody just wanted to say, I made a circular product. And I do sound very cynical right now, sorry. But there's very little to work with right now. And I think that's the challenge now, to close that gap, because there is so much science there, there's so much knowledge there, and there are companies who want to do it. It's not, like everybody blames always like, they want to do it and they have to do it because of legislation that's going to come very soon. A right to repair, having to take back their products and things like that. So closing that gap, I think, is very, very important, which is not really starting to think more about the stuff here, but really think about application.
Yeah.
Is there one good example? Because you see there are only few, but maybe you can.
See, this is there one good example? I mean, there's always like there's a Puma shoe who has sole. So, not so difficult. Is biodegradable. There's all these biodegradable plastics. There's some products that you can. I can't think of one where I really say they're there. No, honestly, it's a bit depressing, but yeah.
So one last question.
Yeah, so I really like the aspect when you were talking about your time in New York and when you were forced to present your design and when you really were rebellious about it and you're like, you want to learn, you know, about designing it and not really presenting it and communicating. And I've worked with designers and sometimes I felt, it's not with all of them, I don't want to generalize, but they're really good at what they're doing, but they had really bad communication skills.
Yeah.
And it was really difficult to get through to them. And I was just wondering, because you have worked in different markets, like what have you picked from these different markets? And how do you use it in terms of like communicating now design? What was your learning and how do you teach your team to communicate it in the best way? How do you train them?
Yeah, talking. So there's two things I want to say if I still have the time. So it's really interesting the perception of design and of designers in different cultures. So in the US, design is, to me, as an outsider, as a German coming to the US, design is kind of this bridge builder, right? And even more so now than back then when I studied, because there's all these statistics about startups that most of the startups fund are designers. Design is between marketing and R&D. Design is between research and So you're always the person who pulls everything together and are in a really powerful situation that way, and more and more so. In Japan, where I worked very long, designers have the it's this understanding that designers are really introverts. That, exactly like you said, that like nobody expects them to communicate. They sit there, they do that. They really highly regard it, because design is in the Japanese culture, as in the German culture, is a very, it comes from craft and it's very, very respected, which in other cultures, in the American, at the time when I studied, it wasn't so much, I felt. It was more that kind of bridge building that was really thought as a good skill. But the thought of designers as communicators is a very, I think, American thing, to the American market. And yes, I tell, like, my team, the people I work with, they have to present, and they have to talk to business people, and they have to talk to marketing people, and they have to talk to R&D people, and they can. I know they can, because designers, but they tend to underestimate their abilities a lot of times. That's my experience, because you do have to think about how is it made. What's the story behind it? What's the brand around? So it's not like you haven't thought about these things. So you might as well talk about them.
Thank you.
Great. So thank you very much. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Philipp.
Thank you, everybody.